Now, it seems like thank you so much, Janelle. It seems like these 4 sessions have flown by. And so tonight we will connect some dots. We'll revisit some ideas from sessions 1, 2, 3, and 4. But thank you all for joining in. Thank you for taking a portion of your day, whether you are here live with us now or you are watching the recording. I'm just grateful that you are taking the time to commit to designing inclusive preschools. And tonight, we'll talk about delivering the promise. Again, if you have not been able to participate in sessions 1, 2, and 3, we have plenty of on-ramps for you, although there will be some connections to those sessions from before. Feel free to go to the recording, look at the links, walk through the resources, and discover for yourself where to make this protest personal. And so my name is Andratesha Fritzgerald. I'm an educator, a mother, an activist, and author. And today, we'll talk about delivering the promise, designing inclusive preschools. And so here's the agenda. We will have a warm-up, a message check, 4 questions to make sure your school got the message, and then number 4, making the protest personal. So if you get pulled away, if you get distracted, the sections are numbered as part of the design so that you will know the on-ramps to come back in. And so for your students, for your early learners, are there songs or rituals or routines that signal here's a change coming? Here's a great place for you to tune in if you've tuned out. This makes it safe to just be yourself, to acknowledge where you get off track, to take advantage of the multiple layers of support that are available, and to normalize support instead of demonizing it. If classrooms are to be truly inclusive, then we have to normalize support and create multiple ways for learners to make decisions for themselves. And so if you revisit session 1, you'll remember that we talked about honor and power, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But before we do, just wanted to warm up with some play. Sometimes it's hard to play when we're in a virtual environment, but I thought that we would start with some play today. Play is so important to the early learning setting, but I would argue that play is important to every learning setting. And so there is an internet rumor, and you know what you hear on the internet is true, right? Supposedly the song that was #1 on the charts on your 7th birthday defines your life. So what is your birthday? Go ahead and add 7 years. And then I want you to find the song that defines your life on birthdayjams.com. And if you could just type in www.birthdayjams.com in the chat so that folks will be able to click on that. I want you to find out what your birthday jam is and then type the title to that song in the chat. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do your research. Supposedly the song that was #1 on the charts on your 7th birthday defines your life. So let's find out, who do we have here today and what defines your life? A little play as we warm up today. So, Because You Love Me by Celine Dion. All right, Lizelle, you've got a great song to define your life. Mariah Carey, Someday. Oh, I just want to sing a little bit of it. It's going to be stuck in my head, Samantha. I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles. Yes. Jennifer. Woohoo. All right, let's see. When I See You Smile by Bad English. Physical. Oh, the calculation. What is your birthday? You add 7 years to that birth date, and then you go to Birthday Jams and type that date in. Oh, Natalie. You can pick another genre and find another definition of life. There are no rules. Let's see, Don't Want to Lose You. Good Luck Charms, Sad Eyes by Robert John. Yeah by Usher. Oh my goodness. I was going to yell the yeah that is from that song into the mic, but then I wanted to keep it professional. We got Rise Up by Andratesha. Annie's Song by John Denver. Killing Me Softly. You Give Love a Bad Name. You could choose another genre if you want another song to define your life. Eric Olson has Thriller. If you're watching the recording, just want you to know some of the definitions of life that are here with us. I'll share mine. I went to the R&B genre And the number one song in 1986 was Ain't Nothing Going On But the Rent. And I don't know if that defines my life, but I had a colleague whose number one song on her on the 7th birthday was Baby Got Back. So I think I'm winning here. So this is just a graphic to kind of support. You do the math, you look up the song, and you think about the message. So what does your birthday jam say to you? This is just a fun way to play around with music. That's okay, Josie. This is me from The Greatest Showman. All right, Juliet, I love it. R&B, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. Heather got a great one. And so here's just a way for us to play a little bit to get to know each other. And then you can extend to think about, what could this song mean? What could be the hidden meaning behind it? Just a way to have fun and to connect. And when we get to share a little bit of life in a way that is safe and non-threatening, it opens the door to community. And when we think about anti-racist, inclusive preschools, safety is key. Lowering the anxiety, building the community, operating in trust, giving time and place to play while we learn, or using play as we learn. Of course, I want to just point out for you some supports along the way. If you are using the transcript, you can use those. Putting the chat in the link so that all you had to do was click, having the directions printed out and being able to hear them, and being able to be an environment where we can ask for help, even as we play. That asking for help is normalized, that supporting one another is normalized. This is how we build an early learning culture that is collaborative, that minimizes threats and barriers, that is supportive. Each of us may need a different kind of support. The recordings is a type of support. The resources is a type of support. The opportunity to play is a type of support. And each of you gets to take the space that you need in order to learn and grow and contribute. And the same is necessary for our students. So as we do each session, and I'm a little bit under the weather, I've got some scratchiness going on in my throat, so please forgive me. But here's your invitation to personalize. And earlier today, I was on a Zoom meeting and someone sneezed, and I felt the need to put my mask on, but then I remembered, oh, it's Zoom. And so even though my throat is scratchy, you're safe where you are. I'm COVID-free, and I am hoping that you are as well. And so we will continue to work together. So invitation to personalize your learning environment. You know how this goes if you've been here before, and if this is your first time, here's an on-ramp to support you as you join us. The picture on the left is foggy. You can barely make out the shapes. If the question is, how ready are you for learning? That picture would be a 0. Really foggy, not focused at all. No strategies to figure out what I don't know. My body is present. My brain is not available. That's a 0. The picture on the right is beautifully in focus. You can see the clouds in the sky, the different color shades of grass, even the different kinds of trees. And so people have already begun to rate themselves. And so where are you? If the question is, how ready for learning are you? How focused for learning are you? How would you rate yourself? 0 to 5. Go ahead and type your number in the chat.
And Andratesha, we don't see your screen.
Oh, no. Well, we're off to a fantastic start.
We saw your beautiful face, so that's great.
Okay, so let me see. You didn't see the birthday jam slide?
No.
And I described it in wonderful detail for you.
You did. We put it in the chat. I wasn't sure if you meant to show that.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If this is any indication of how the session will go today, then we're all in the right place, judgment-free, filled with grace, and ready to move forward. So this is the support that I was describing for you that you just didn't see. And so there's the little birthday jam directions. Number 1, you do the math. Number 2, you look up the song. And number 3, you think about the message. And so for some learners, they'll need that support, that these steps are sequenced, that there are pictures along the way, just so that they can make sure that they're following the right path. And then if it's not enough, then we personalize the support, just like someone asked in the chat, can I have the directions again? Well, here they are. And now you can see them. All right, so you've had a chance to rate yourself 0 to 5. And now we'll take about 15 seconds for you to personalize your learning environment. Whether you're a -3 or a 4.5, what can you do to move yourself just a little bit closer to 5 to optimize that learning environment so that you're ready to learn and ready to take in? And so I'll give you 15 seconds without the sound of my voice. And if you could just type in the chat what changes you made. Some people need to close the tabs in the background. Some need to open them. Some need to tidy up their workspace or grab some water or snacks, stand or sit. Maybe march in place, take some deep breaths. Some people may need to turn their ringer off on their phone just so that they can focus. Whatever it is that you need to do, take the next 15 seconds without the sound of my voice to do just that. Go. Five, four, three, two, one. What kind of changes did you make? You can go ahead and type those in the chat. What are some of the things that you did to personalize your learning environment? And by sharing what you did, it may give others an idea of what they need to do. Thank you so much for sharing those. And so in my book, Anti-Racism and Universal Design for Learning, it ends actually by talking about this controversy. Controversy is born the moment dreamers begin taking action. And tonight we're talking about delivering on the promise, this action. By taking action to invite the marginalized ones into the secret society of success, it takes bravery to dream beyond the locked gates of educational access for all. It takes guts to create environments dedicated to the academic success of Black and Brown children. And I would also add Indigenous children and children with disabilities. It takes guts to open the doors where they have previously been slammed shut. It takes rebellion to protest the educational status quo by not just believing in an empowering educational journey for every Black and Brown learner, but by living it, sharing it, cultivating it, and rebuking everyone who isn't striving for it. This group of rabble-rousing, barrier-eliminating, culture-busting wild men and women are the ones who will actualize the dream of access and success for all. And so I begin with that quote for you to get a picture of the students who have been marginalized, to speak the names of those who have been pushed out of regular education spaces into self-contained classrooms, other settings, out of the norm with no support, those who have been looked upon and then forced to take a different path other than their peers. And so I wanted to just take you on a journey with me as we think about what it looks like to be culture busting wild men and women. I think about my kindergarten teacher that I've talked to you about, who taught me the skills, but also motivated me with the empowerment and the skills to support myself. She made it easy for me to think with my own children about how to break the stereotypes that maybe people think that Black families don't spend time together reading. And so we decided for our photo shoot for our family that we would take our favorite books and take a picture of ourselves reading as a protest to what people think about us, to who we actually are. And as I taught high school for many years and interacted with children of all ages in my role as an administrator, I realized how important play was for children, for them to be able to dress up and make stories come to life, to learn skills and put them into action with play, and how it is so important for us, as in this bottom corner, to take a seat as teachers and take direction from our learners. They may place us in a box, they may make us a part of their skit, they may have us doing ridiculous dances, but if we can show them ourselves as learners, then it opens up the door for them to be safe, to learn from us. And ultimately, if our goal is to see each student graduate from high school prepared to enter into the world confident, with the skills ready to reach the goals that they identify for themselves, then we have to move backwards to our design. And that we've warmed up, And the message check is stop number 2. And so, what message would you give fellow educators about this series? What pictures are being created with data? How are you capturing our youngest learners on paper, in data? And when you learn that something is not working and that your design is not meeting the needs for certain students, particularly Black and Brown and Indigenous learners or learners with disabilities, then does that data, does that picture hurt enough for you to change? And when we think about what needs to change, how does that pain, that hurt, change our design? And when we move to change our design, are we inviting parents, families, and communities into the creation process? And then how will we deliver on the promise of inclusion to every early childhood learner? Discover, data, design, delivery. We've talked quite a bit about universal design for learning as a method to break down those walls and barriers. And so as you reimagine the early childhood classroom, a classroom that is welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and challenging to all learners, I want you to think about multiple means of engagement. What does support look like in the early childhood setting? Are you recruiting interest, giving learners choices on how they interact or what they want to learn about? Are you giving them tools to sustain their effort and persistence, that they have a game plan for when they get frustrated, or when they need to calm down just a bit, or when they need to personalize their learning environment, maybe putting the bungee cords on the chair or using a swivel seat simply to calm themselves? And then are you giving tools for self-regulation, not you being an external regulator, but teaching learners how to regulate themselves, giving them tools for optimizing motivation, helping them to recognize what coping skills are available to them and strategies that they can use, helping them to self-assess before turning over their work to you for assessment. Are you utilizing multiple means of representation, meaning that learners can take the learning in with video and song and movement and dance and poetry? Or is there only one way to learn that brings some into that power seat and pushes everyone else to the borders or the fringes of that wheel of power and privilege that we'll revisit today? And is there multiple means of action and expression? Can learners show you what they know in different ways with physical action? Is there support for creating their answers and sharing their voice with you? And are there options for executive functioning, meaning that preschoolers, early childhood setting is learning how to set a goal for themselves? What would you like to accomplish? What goal would you like to reach? Where are you having trouble and you would like to do better? We can have these conversations, build in this support, because ultimately every learner deserves to be an expert learner, purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed. And so when we think about an inclusive classroom that is anti-racist, that pulls all students into that power seat to make decisions for themselves, Robert Livingston in the Harvard Business Review shared a strategy called PRESS, how to promote racial equity in the workplace, that I think translates fantastically to our classrooms. And so as practitioners, we have to press. The P is for having a problem awareness. Do we truly understand what the problem is in the data, in the outcomes post-secondary, in the design, in the delivery, in connecting with parents? Do we know what the problem is? And if we don't know, do we ask? Because we cannot assume. And when we ask, we have to collect that survey data. We have to have those interviews one-on-one. We have to look at the outcome data, and we have to value the experience data for our learners, for our families, for our practitioners. And so that's the P. The R is a root cause analysis. Do I understand where the problem comes from? And when I find out where the problem comes from, we have to listen without judgment and honor the voices that shared the problem. And if the problem awareness point to my design, my decision, and my biases, then I have to listen without judgment and honor the voices that are sharing with me. If it is shared with me, then I have to move to the E. And that's the empathy. Do I care enough about the problem and the people it harms? Many times we move right to strategy. We move right into doing something, but we haven't empathized with the problem that we're causing, the harm that is inflicted upon the people, and the ethic of care with which we must operate. And this is moving from power, where we know what the problem is, or we find out a little bit about the problem, we move right to strategy. In order to honor our learners, it's an ethic of care before taking action to correct the problem. We must honor the people. And then the S is for strategy and sacrifice. Do I know how to correct the problem? And am I willing to do it? The part about sacrifice is that we're giving up something in order to serve those who we've harmed in the past. And so historically marginalized identities, we have to recognize the harm that even what we value or what we think is the right way causes to them. So are you willing to press, to ask and not assume, to listen and not judge, to honor before moving to action? Press. And so power plus honor equals action. And so we have to recognize the problem, which Robert Livingston says that when we think about racism, racial discrimination is defined as differential evaluation or treatment based solely on race, regardless of intent. And so we have an opportunity to use honor to eliminate racism with action. We have an opportunity to eliminate ableism with action. As we look at the data, as we look at the discovery period for us, where we go back and see where are we falling short, who are we serving well, are the post-secondary outcomes matching with the expectations that we have in early childhood? And if they are not, are we willing to listen and learn, empathize and honor before taking action? And so we have 4 questions in our third stop to make sure that the message of inclusion has made it to your school. And so here are 4 questions that you can ask yourself or practitioners to make sure that the message of inclusion is not somewhere out there, but in the fiber of the school. And so, has the message of inclusion made it to your school? You hold the power to honor. And so this is that same 1, 2, 3. You hold the power to honor. And when you honor others, there's change. We have to overcome denial that there is no problem or that our decisions don't cause harm for others. Every single one of us has biases. Every single one of us has prejudice that we have to work to overcome. And so we have to focus on this potential for growth and then provide examples of how to change behavior. There is statistics that say that school districts that overcome these racial barriers, that see success for students of all races and ability levels, have been trained on how to see differently, kind of like what you're doing here today. And so question number 1 is, does your school have more supports available in the regular education classroom? Are there all kinds of supports available? Are learners adapted to seeing that some students need something other than what I do in order to learn, even in our early childhood setting? Do students have an understanding of what support looks like, and that everyone can take a different stance on support to have what they need? I was able to spend some time at CHIME, which is a national model for inclusion that's in California. And what I saw, the school is dedicated to radical inclusion. And so racially, economically, ability levels, students with disabilities, even significant disabilities, are educated in one space. And so I was able to sit and watch in the early childhood setting, students work together. There was one student who used crutches to walk, and there was another student who was walking alongside him, and they decided together that because it took a little bit longer for the student to get to the playground, which was adaptive and everyone could use the equipment there, that they played counting games on the way to the playground. And so they were not bothered by the fact that it took longer to get there. Some students ran ahead, others stayed back a little longer, but they had a strategy to use to build in that time in between. And that speaks to supports being available for all students to use what they have in order to have a good time along the way. Some used the pave, some ran through the dirt and the grass, others used their wheelchairs, but each student took the support that they needed in order to accomplish the goal of reaching the playground to play. And so does your school have more supports available in the regular education classroom, or are supports being siloed to the special education setting? If we want more inclusive classrooms, support has to be normalized and not demonized. And so if you remember, this is data from session 1. And we think about this percentage of preschoolers with an IEP who receive the majority of special education services in the regular education classroom trending downward. And so if we want to see this number increase, if we want to see more students with an IEP receiving the majority of their special education services in the regular early childhood program, then we have to normalize support. And it takes all of us to do that. Question number 2 is, do historically marginalized students and families have a seat at the table where policies are made, reviewed, and discussed? When we think about students with disabilities, Black, Brown, and Indigenous families who are historically marginalized, educated in different settings, and we look at the number of suspensions, seclusions, and restraints, perhaps there is a cultural mismatch because those who are creating the rules don't have the families, the students, the learners at the table together to figure out what is normative for them, what is culturally respectful and responsible for them. And so research has shown evidence of systematic bias in teacher expectations for African-American students, and non-Black teachers were found to have lower expectations of Black students than Black teachers. What this means, what this statistic says to us is that when there is a difference, a cultural mismatch, and then one group is creating policy for another, Nathan, who is an advocate for a self-advocate for individuals with autism, coined the term "nothing about us without us." And so we have to take that same stance, that same viewpoint when we are designing, when we are creating, we are recreating policy, that we have all members of our learning community at the table. Question number 3, are early childhood programs built on play, discovery, and support? And are the expectations of the learner showing up in the learning? Are early childhood programs built on play, discovery, and support? And are the expectations of the learner showing up in the learning? I wanted this statistic to be in here that Black students are 3.8 times as likely to receive 1 or more out-of-school suspensions as white students. Those Black students who have an intersection with disability are suspended at a rate that's even higher than this one. And so when there is not an emphasis on play or discovery and support, when the expectations of those in power who can make the decisions are mismatched from the expectation of the learners and their families, then what happens is Black students with disabilities are penalized, students with disabilities are pushed out and suspended, resulting in missing school, being pulled away from the educational setting, and then placed on the margins of learning, pushed behind in their academics. And this starts at the early childhood place. If we want a different outcome, then this wheel of power and privilege will have to remind us that if our classrooms don't take into account culture, ability, identity, size, then we place children on the margins before we even get a chance to access or assess what they know, what they're capable of. When we're not designing for them, then the road is dangerous to them. And so, question number 4, are more Black learners with disabilities showing up in the suspension rate than the graduation rate? Are there more referrals to special education than gifted programming? And I wanted to talk about the graduation rate because in session 1 and in session 2, we talked about those post-secondary outcomes that don't start in high school. They really start with the experience, that our learners have in early childhood. And so, while Black students comprise approximately 19% of the preschool population, they represent 47% of preschool suspensions, and that's from the United States Department of Education data pool from 2016. And so when we think about these early childhood statistics and the post-secondary outcomes, we have to ask ourselves some serious questions. Are we using our power and privilege to give each learner an advantage, each learner an opportunity to make decisions for themselves, to have access to support? We cannot, in good conscience or in good teaching, stand by and watch another generation be marginalized because we don't take action. Inaction is agreement. Inaction is racism. Inaction is injustice, and inaction is inhumane. Inaction for us is not an option. Just take a moment to reflect on those 4 questions, and then we'll move forward. So you can type in the chat if you have some reflections, some takeaways, and then we'll jump into the last part of our session for today. So take about 2 minutes to share any reflections, and then we'll jump back in. About 1 minute, and you can type your reflections in the chat. About 20 seconds. Thank you all for taking the time to just reflect. Our last stop for today, yield 4, is to make the protest personal. And so if inclusion is our goal, then we'll have to push back against tradition, push back against custom, push back on ideas. We'll have to protest. And so when we are constructing a universally designed anti-racist learning environment for the safety of Black, Indigenous learners of color and learners with disabilities, then we will have to design for the safety of learners. And while anti-racist UDL can be messy, inconvenient, and sometimes difficult, it keeps us in the position of expert learner that we'll have to continue to learn about those who we are serving and learn about what we can do differently in order for them to reach the goal of independence that they have and expect for themselves. And every time you eliminate a barrier for learners, the hard work, the messiness, the inconvenience is worth it. And so I found this picture of students, of learners protesting, of children carrying this message that racism isn't born, it's taught. And so when we look at the children who are marching, who are fighting, I want for us to carry the message. We need to make the changes so that they don't have to fight, so that they don't have to push to be included, so that supports will be available for every learner, whether they are Black or brown, whether they are rich or poor, whether they have a disability or do not, that every student will see support as normal, whether that support is intensive or not, that every learner will know that I have the ability to take what I need in order to learn, and that this learning environment has been designed with me in mind, that families and community members will feel like we're here to lock arms with them to help their child get to the destination that they choose together with their child. Not that we will pigeonhole them to the expectations of our own, but we will release our biases, release our prejudices, and design for their success. The message of inclusion. We design our classrooms to constantly really pull out what every student brings in. We have to continue to give them the message: you did not come here empty-handed, meaning that you have something to offer this learning environment. Your voice, your words, your thoughts, your play, your song, it is welcome here. You are welcomed and valuable, and not just in our words, but in our design, in our seating options, in our multiple means of representation, in the way that we value songs and cultures and poetry and movement. We design for the learner to feel welcomed and valued. We have to design that that allows our students to know that they have a space to teach us, to share with us, and for us to grow as they teach us, that we have to learn from them, and that their destination is important to you and me, and that we will design with whatever destination they choose in mind. Your destination is important to me. Do your learners know that? Do they feel it in your design? Do they see it in the choices and options they have for how they're welcomed into the classroom, with places that they can sit, if they can take a moment to stand or sit or choose a different seat, if they can make a choice for which interaction they want to visit first? Are we giving them space in a setting that says you're not only included, but you belong here? The message of inclusion only goes where the messenger of inclusion takes it. And I hope that each time you look in the mirror, you think of, what can I do? What can I do to change those outcomes, to create spaces of inclusion, to partner with those who know what to do when I don't, to listen to the voices of even our youngest, give me instruction on how to serve them. Opening the doors for their families to be trusted visitors in our space, inclusive for them as well, to be a part of the learning process. And so what happens when we don't design differently? I'm going to introduce 3 terms to you tonight, or maybe you've heard them before, but a micro assault is an explicit racial derogation characterized primarily by a violent verbal or nonverbal attack to hurt the intended victim through name calling, avoidant behavior, or purposeful discriminatory actions. And so micro assaults happen when we avoid the topic of ableism, when we do not discuss racism, when we push out and decide who belongs here and who should get support over there. This is a micro assault. And while it can be using racial epithets or assuming inferiority based on race or diagnosis, or refusing to work with the student because of the color of their skin, it can also be avoiding a student because of their disability. And that is assaultive, causing injury to each learner, not just the learner who is targeted at, but each learner who witnesses it is also injured. The next term is micro insult. And this is communication that conveys rudeness or insensitivity and demeans a person's racial heritage or their identity. And so this can be hidden or low-key insults. It can be an underlying message of incompetence, where we assign support without students selecting supports. It can be comments about color as qualifications rather than merits. And so these are micro insults. And there's nothing micro about it, but that's just the term that they use because it's not direct. It happens indirectly. It's rudeness, it's insensitivity, it's making decisions for someone who is capable to make the decisions for themselves, like where to sit or how to stand, or when I need a break. There's a micro insult when we don't value and empathize with the person to honor them before we take action. Last but not least is micro invalidation. And these are verbal comments or behaviors that exclude, negate, nullify the psychological thoughts, feelings, or experimental reality of a person of color or a person with a disability, dismissing the role of race or ability in a particular topic, ascribing to a colorblind ideology, or complimenting a person of color on their proficiency. Micro invalidation is when we take away the idea that a person with a condition, a diagnosis, a skin color, or maybe a person who emerges from a home in poverty, that they could ever contribute something positive. This is why universal design for learning is so important, because there is an assumption of competence that yields confidence in each of our learners. And if we don't design differently, the micro assaults, the micro insults, the micro invalidations will injure each learner, pushing them into that mold of a stereotype threat where they believe what society has said, the actions that have been taken, and the pushing to the borders that marginalization is the full of their identity. And that is just not true. And so what do we need to do? For those of us who are serious about inclusion, about anti-racism, about universal design for learning, we have to know that it is an expressway and not teleportation. We have to put on our hard hats to protect our strategic thinking, that this is possible. We have to put on our safety glasses to protect the vision that we have of all means all. We have to put on our high visibility vest and allow our work to be seen, our decisions to be known, our protests to be personal, and for each person who is not on board to understand the why behind our work. And then we have to have on our hearing protection to shield our ears from naysayers who believe that those with disabilities should go here, or that Black children don't deserve this, or that brown children shouldn't get the support that they need, or emerging bilinguals should have to learn one way. If there is one way that we're all learning, then that guarantees that someone is being pushed out. And so that wheel of power and privilege is perpetuated even farther for those who are in the center, and the marginalization continues for those who are on the borders. We have to get on that expressway to learning and push for change. If we don't design differently, this is the picture from my 5th grade class, and you have to revisit session 2 if you were not here. If we don't design differently, then we make the decision that the way things have always been is the way things should always be. We need community. And so as we move forward together, as those of us who are committed to pushing forward, to designing inclusive learning environments, to utilizing those multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression, then we will push forward. So I'm going to ask you today, as we press and we think about what the problems are, how do we reach those families? How do we change things? And does it hurt enough for us to change? In 1 minute, I want you to write the most important takeaway from today's lesson or session. What's the most important takeaway from you? And you can either type it in the chat or put it in the interactive slides. It's up to you. Take about 2 minutes and I'll pop over to the interactive slides to see if there are some responses there. I'll give you a few minutes to think. about 30 seconds. And I see some hands raised. Would love to take some questions as you all are reflecting.
So if anyone has questions, you can feel free to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat box. I am monitoring. Andratesha, let me know when you are ready for questions, because there is one that was added to the chat.
Yes, I am ready for questions, and anytime.
So one of it's question / statement, but one of earlier in the presentation, there was a comment made. I do wonder about the rigor or academics in school. Is that also a part of the mismatch? Are we asking too much of children too soon? Are our practices not developmentally appropriate and adding to dysregulation of children in classrooms? How are we using the zone of proximal development to guide our practices and relating that back to anti-racist fundamentals?
Thank you for that question. That is phenomenal. I'm glad that you're thinking that. And so when we think about a cultural mismatch, the only way that we will know is to ask. I just think about Nathan over and over again, nothing about us without us. How are we gaining information from learners? What expectations are rooted in cultural norms, that culture of power, that are leading to dysregulation because it's simply not appropriate for the culture that we're serving or for some of the students that are in the classroom. When we create options that give choice, we learn more about what learners need from us by the choices that they make. We coach alongside to help them see if these choices are best for them. But ultimately, the more learners are able to make the choice for themselves and evaluate that choice, then the more culturally responsive we become, because we're designing with their choices in mind. We're allowing them to teach us. And so when it comes to rigor, many times people think that if you're utilizing universal design for learning, or you are utilizing culturally responsive techniques, that rigor is thrown off to the side. Rigor is not relaxed. The standard is not flexible. The standard is rigid, but the pathway to the standard is customizable. And many times we as educators want to hold all aspects of how learners get to the standard in our control. But what I'm advocating for is, in an anti-racist, universally designed learning environment, is that we relinquish control responsibly and we give learners a chance to make decisions for themselves, even on small things like whether to sit or stand, or where to sit, or how to take in the learning, to maybe choose between a video or a direct instruction lesson, or maybe an experiential zone, and then to choose a second one. So maybe if it's not your first choice, you have a second choice to choose from. And there are some learners who are going to want to do all 3 or 4. And as we get smarter about the choices that make learners come to life as a learner, then we create more opportunities for them. Thank you for that question. That dysregulation, I also believe, is just communication to us that something is off and something is not working. In session 1, I talked about Bruce Perry and Oprah's book, What Happened to You? And he has a whole section in that book on dysregulation and the keys or communication that it gives us. Maybe there's trauma happening. Maybe there's a cultural mismatch. Maybe there is a need for more connection from a loving, caring adult, which, if they're in your classroom, then maybe that's you. Maybe there's need for more space for play or discovery. And so dysregulation says something's out of balance. And the way we design our classrooms can invite that balance back in if there's consistency, there's care, and there's opportunity.
Don't see any other questions in the chat at this time, Andratesha, but there is a comment in here that I would love to lift up because I know you will appreciate it. There's someone who says, The idea of asking kids to sit at the seat of making decisions has been turning around in my mind since the very first session last week. I'm planning to make some pictures and start a conversation with learners about what they want to work on during the day or the week that would make them proud of themselves. It's very theoretical in my head right now while I plan, but I'm very excited to become a scientist and see what happens.
Try everything. Oh, my day is made. Thank you so much. And just as you explore, you will learn from your learners so much. They will give you so much insight on how to craft a lesson that lights up their expectations, their curiosity, their natural inclinations, that connects to their strengths. So thank you for taking the message, making it personal, and putting the learning to work by asking, not assuming, and then designing with instead of designing for. Thank you.
I knew you would love and appreciate that, because it's taking a risk, creating change. Some of these are new practices for some of us, and it might be scary, but we have to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate that. In this judgment-free zone, this is where we're learning together in practice. Thank you for, oh my goodness, this has been such an incredible series, and the way that you have brought inclusion and anti-racist practices in universal design for learning and braided them together has just been absolutely remarkable. We are in great appreciation for you, Andratesha, and I know I speak for the rest of the team and everyone else online. It's been an absolute pleasure. I don't want it to end, but we are so glad that we got to spend this time learning with and from you in the last few sessions. Thank you so much.
Inclusion is possible. It's our actions, our asking that builds that expressway for learners to see themselves in the driver's seat and make it happen while we support. Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And all of the valuable resources that you shared that are now on the Padlet for folks to revisit, along with the recordings. They can, review the recorded webinars after today's session. We're also so appreciative of. I do want to let folks know, because we have all of our preschool trailblazers on the line, that the SIP project has been working really, really hard on a new preschool webpage that is also jam-packed with resources. And Andratesha, with your help and your resources, we're going to be able to add to this webpage. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat right now for everyone to take with them, and know that we're going to link that also to the follow-up email so that they can share that widely. But we really want to start creating this network of inclusion preschool trailblazers across the state of California.
Awesome. I just want to share that you can sign up for my newsletter at buildingblocksofbrilliance.com. Would love to connect on Twitter at Fritzgerald and keep the conversation going. Happy to support you all. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to help shape what early childhood learners experience through your work. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great time off for those of you who are taking time off, and holidays and rest. If that's what you're celebrating, is having some rest and relaxation, we hope you have a good one. Thanks. Bye.